Right, welcome back everyone. I'm very excited to be back here on YouTube. This is the second episode that I'm making, and I'm very excited because really the first episode I felt like the possibilities are infinite. If you remember, we searched the word Samaritan, and we had the first search result. Actually, it happened that it's not actually related to Samaritans at all. It's just a movie named Samaritan, starred apparently by Sylvester Stallone, one of my favorite actors. But anyway, today we're going to continue the search about the Samaritan community. If you do not know, I'm from the Samaritan community that lives on Mount Gerizim, right in the middle of the Holy Land. We believe that we are, descendants of the kingdom of Israel, which was in the north, and it was also known as the kingdom of Samaria. And there's also the kingdom of Judea, which was in the south. And we believe that across 3,600 years, we never left the Holy Land. But today, there's not many Samaritans around the world. There's only, we're only aware of the community on Mount Gerizim, where I live, and also the Samaritans who live in Tel Aviv and Cholon. And I opened this channel specifically because I think it's really fun to learn about, any culture around the world, any tradition around the world, and even I'm a very, very, very curious person about really hundreds of topics. So I wanted to start with this one specifically because it's also one of my favorite ones to talk about the nations that lived here in the Holy Land, and what were they good at, and what did they fail in, and how did those communities evolve, and what happened exactly that they do not exist anymore. Like, for example, the Samaritans, like my community, we believe we actually lived among the Canaanites, and today we do not hear anyone that call themselves really Canaanites. And I think there's a lot of things to explore that I never really had the chance to talk about and really read. So I thought, why not do it and also record myself doing it and learning about what does the internet have to do about the Samaritans, because I did read a few books about the Samaritan community and the history, but there are not that many books out there. So in the last episode we had a little bit of reading from Wikipedia. Today we will continue actually with the third result. Let's see. This is Rotten Tomatoes again about the movie Samaritans. Every life lost in suicide is a tragedy. I'm sure if you heard the word Good Samaritan, you know what this is. Basically, Samaritans, or the word Samaritan, is known for those people who help people with depression or suicidal thoughts. They can basically talk with them on the phone and help them go through hard times. And I think it's a beautiful example to be used. Second one is also not connected to Samaritans, as you can see. It's also a movie. So we go to the second page. Here we see Samaritan, member of a community now nearly extinct, that claims to be related by blood to those Israelites of ancient Samaria. Let's check it out. So here it says Samaritan, and then under it says Judaism, which is typical because the word Samaritanism, which is how we call the the religion of the Samaritan community, we say Samaritanism. But today most people do not know that there is such a thing that exists. As you can see here, member of a community. The word Samaritan means a member of a community now nearly extinct. And then it says here, alright, so that claims to be related by blood to those Israelites of ancient Samaria who were not deported by the Assyrian conquerors of the kingdom of Israel in 722 BCE. So when the Assyrians basically came to conquer the land, one of the things that they did was they exiled the northern tribes. It is known that they exiled around 30,000, 27,000 to be more exact, of those northern Israelites, known to be in the higher status group, and then they exiled them, and then they had to kind of like replace them with another group that came from Iraq, or also known as Kuta. So continuing on here, the Samaritans called themselves Bnei Yisrael, children of Israel. This is true. Or Shamarim, which means observant ones, for their sole norm of religious observance is the Pentateuch, first 5 books of the Old Testament. This is also true. We have the first 5 books of Moses. We also have Joshua, but it's very, very different than the book of Joshua, which the Jewish people have. So, by the way, when it says here nearly extinct, today we're 850. We're doing very good. 100 years ago, however, the lowest population was 150. So this was, I think 850 is also a pretty low number, but we're doing extremely well. So, I mean, this can be changed maybe in those days. So, in the Talmud, Rabbinical Compendium, a collection of concise but detailed information about a particular subject, especially in a book or other publication. Law, lore, and commentary. They are called Kutim, yes. Again, some people call the Samaritans Kutim, especially in Judaism, because of the location where the Samaritans are believed they were kind of like imported from, as you can see, from Kuta. Among the most significant differences between the Samaritans and the Jews is the site. We talked about this. Samaritans, Mount Gerizim, and the Jewish people, Jerusalem. So I think that's pretty much it. It's just other ones talk about Ashkenazi, Mizrahi. I'm not sure what this website is exactly about. All right, let's go for the search for the next. All right, next we have Samaritan Ministries. Also something related to the Good Samaritan, probably. Samaritan definition. From the parable of the Good Samaritan in Luke 10:30-37, a person who is generous in helping those in distress. A native or inhabitant of Samaria. This is super rare to see. Interesting. Samaria. And let's see how do they define Samaria. A district of ancient Palestine west of the Jordan River between Galilee and Judea. Okay, it was in the west of the Jordan River. It's true. Doesn't mention though it's in the north. Well, it does say between Galilee and Judea. So yeah. Alright, and second it says city, capital of the district of Samaria and capital of the northern kingdom, Israel. Samaria was rebuilt by Herod the Great and renamed Sebaste. Okay, so it's actually Sebastia, which is really interesting. Sebastia is actually 30 minutes away from Mount Gerizim here where we live, and it is believed to be, to have been one of the, basically the capital of Samaria. We'll probably have a special episode about Sebastia alone. Samaritan Health Services, John 4, the Jesus talks with a Samaritan woman. Do check that story out. Samaritan Health, again, we barely see anything until now about Samaritans. Watch it, as you can see. Sylvester still slums it in Amazons. Good Samaritan Society, Samaritan International. Wow. Okay, so we are barely seeing anything Samaritan by now, and we're already at the 4th page. And what I mean is about the Samaritan community, sorry. Good Samaritan Museum, which is, by the way, barely connected to the Samaritan themselves. It does talk about the Samaritan person who healed the Jewish person, as Jesus talks about the story, the parable. All right, so let's do a small search update. What we will search for is the Samaritan. So what we're going to search for is the Samaritan community. Let's search for this one. All right, one very important website if you want to check out more information about the Samaritans from a Samaritan source is Israelite-Samaritans.com. Here you can see pretty much a lot of things, starting with news and starting art, medals. Like there's something called it's a Samaritan Medal of Peace. Media, music. There's a lot of cool things to see, so do check it out. The Modern Trials of the Ancient Samaritans. All right, let's see. The Samaritan community has lived in the Middle East for thousands of years, but they are having to find new ways to secure their future. Helena reports from the West Bank. This is one typical famous way to talk about the Samaritans, and especially reporters who wanna, or journalists, who do want to kind of create an article that talks about the Samaritan situation and how they're increasing in numbers, and if they're marrying it from outside, and where are they marrying from outside. But I couldn't stop the car, and so they also shot me. They're talking about a priest here. So basically, there was a priest who was shot by both Palestinians and Israelis, because when he was shot by Palestinians, apparently 2 people shot on him, thinking he was some settler or something. Then he rushed to the hospital or something, but on the way, unfortunately, there was also Israeli soldiers waiting for him, and they thought that he was also going to attack, because he was basically going at an incredible speed. So he is lucky to be alive today, thankfully. It is the Samaritans' holiest place, talking about the Mount Gerizim, where their temple once stood, and where they say Abraham came to sacrifice Isaac. It's true. The Israelites, the Samaritans, in the Samaritan belief, we believe that Abraham basically brought Isaac, and he almost sacrificed him on Mount Gerizim. So unlike in the Jewish stories, where that is believed to have been in Jerusalem. The Palestinians know we live with Arabic people, but inside their mind they think we're Jewish. And because we also speak Arabic, the Jewish people think we're Arab. So we have a big problem. We're between 2 fires. We do deal with that sometimes, because that people will stereotype you in any way, kind of like how you speak, what language you speak, or what you wear, or religion. So when the Palestinians know that we kind of have the Torah, some people have the idea of us being, in a sense, Jewish. I mean, you can argue yes and no at that, because the word Jewish today is used for basically anyone that follows the Torah or have basically a Jewish background, like a Jewish parents. But vice versa, when we speak Arabic, the Israelis do believe that we speak that we are Arabic, or we are Arab because we speak Arabic. They are building good relations with their Palestinian and Jewish neighbors, and are unique in the region for having both Israeli and Palestinian identity papers. Well, this is true, because we do have the ability to go to Israeli cities, Palestinian cities, and we are able to even have the Jordanian passport. So we kind of have this huge circle of freedom to go all over the Holy Land, all over Jordan even. So this is something unique to the Samaritans mostly. The Samaritan drivers help us because they can take goods to Israel in one day, he tells me at his shop, this exporter of car parts to Nazareth and Haifa, Ibrahim. Well, yeah. It's also some Samaritans did work in this specific work because they have those shortcuts they can cross. So you can hire a Samaritan to deliver the goods for you between borders if you are not allowed to do that, and provided you can do it legally. Mr. Cohen tells me that since there are many more men than women, they have to look outside their community to find potential wives. It's normal, because you see that you're considered a Samaritan from the father side rather than the mother side. So the more people that know about the Samaritans, the better, she says. This will give them security for their future. Why? So let's see here. To address this, Benjamin Sindaka, a Samaritan historian, have spent the past 7 years working on an English translation of the Samaritan Torah. True, you can check this out, by the way. Literally search for Amazon, English translation of the Samaritan Torah. One of the world's most ancient religious texts. By Daniel. I know Daniel, good friend. According to the parable that Jesus tells in the New Testament, the Good Samaritan was one of the one who lent a hand to a Jewish traveler found beaten on the side of the road. 2,000 years later, the Samaritans are still around. They're one of the oldest and tiniest religious minorities in the Holy Land. We praise people as Good Samaritans, but there's a complex history behind the phrase. I don't think I read this one. Good Samaritan is a label often used to describe someone acting selflessly to benefit others, even if a total stranger. Some may recognize the phrase, the injured man was ignored by two men passing by, both of whom belonged to groups who were religiously respected in Jesus' Jewish community. And then, of course, we know the story that happened, that the beaten man is housed, cared for, and fed. Of course, we know the story where the beaten man is housed, cared for, and fed, with all the expenses paid by the Samaritan traveler. As a professor of biblical studies who has written about Samaritans, I've learned that while most of my students have heard about the Good Samaritan, fewer are aware of the social and historical realities reflected in the story, much less than the Samaritan community still exists today. Alright, he says here that he's written about the Samaritans, so apparently it's... What does that open? Apparently it might be a book. Biblical mentions, we have the story of the Good Samaritan. We have Luke 9, which describes an unwelcome reception Jesus' disciples receives as they are about to enter a Samaritan village. This is also mentioned in Luke 9. The villagers therefore choose not to help travelers on their way. In response, the disciples are ready to call down divine retribution as punishment from heaven. Jesus will have none of it and rebukes the disciples while leaving the villagers in peace. The Gospel of John also talks about, of course, the famous story of the Samaritan woman. Early converts. In fact, it is quite likely the Samaritans were among the first followers of Jesus' movement. In the book of Matthew, Jesus directs his disciples to preach only to the house of Israel and not to Samaritans or non-Jews. Alright, seeming to display an anti-Samaritan bias. The Gospel of John paints quite a different picture, however, first with the account of the Samaritan woman at the well. Because what happened when we remember the story of the Samaritan woman and the encounter with Jesus, that Jesus kind of, in a sense, she knew that he was the Messiah. That's how the story talks about it. But here it says that Jesus directs his disciples to preach only to the house of Israel. Alright, interesting. The book of Acts, which describes the start of the Christian church, includes the story of Stephen, who is described as the first martyr among Jesus' followers. Acts 7 depicts Stephen trying to defend himself against charges of blasphemy using a text that is at least influenced by Samaritan tradition, if not a version of what will become the Samaritan Pentateuch itself. Okay. See, the Samaritan Pentateuch has about between 5,000 to 7,000 differences. And when we talk about differences, we mean that there's about basically 30 to 40 big, huge ones that are like the Ten Commandments, or changes in word that are very important, like the word chose and chosen, or like the word chose and will choose. So there are some important differences. Here it says, despite this important role in the beginning of the Jesus movement, the relationship between Christianity and Samaritanism has not always been positive. The group has often been required to navigate between much larger and more powerful groups, whether they be Jewish, Christian, or Muslim, violence, displacement, and conversions, both voluntary and forced, have dramatically diminished the Samaritan community over the centuries. That's true. One of the reasons for why our numbers are very low. 21st century. Today, the Samaritan numbers between somewhere around 1,000 people. Most are in communities in Tel Aviv, near the West Bank. This we also know, my friends. So until now, believe it or not, we are still not even touching the surface of what is really inside, what can be hidden. Visit the Samaritan community on TripAdvisor. Oh, is my internet off? Oh, wow, okay. 1/5 of the tiny Samaritan community in Nablus died in the epidemic of 1786. This is something I do not recall reading. A 3-page narrative of an epidemic that raged in Nablus in 1786 and its tragic consequences for the Samaritan community is preserved today in the British Library. The epidemic, possibly the plague or cholera, took the lives of approximately 4,000 people. Of these, about 20 were Samaritan men, women, and children, 1/5 of the city's Samaritan population. If that was 1/5, that probably means that they were around 120, 150. Just makes sense that this is the case in that year. But it's just, that's it, basically. So, apparently historian Ibrahim has recorded these things. So there was an epidemic in 1786. Pretty sad. There's 20. That's a pretty huge number. I mean, compared to that small number of the Samaritans at that time, 20 dying from the epidemic. I hope there are still Samaritans in the future in this tiny ethno-religious community in the occupied West Bank is fighting to keep its traditions alive. This is Al Jazeera. Kiryat lives on occupied West Bank as the sun sets over Mount Gerizim. It is easy to see why the Samaritans regard it as the holiest place on earth. Looking out over the Palestinian city of Nablus on one side and rolling hills on the other side, the mountain is an oasis in an increasingly troubled region. The Samaritans, a tiny ethno-religious community of fewer than 1,000 people who live in an area between Mount Gerizim in the occupied West Bank and Holon in Israel, trace their roots back to two ancient biblical tribes that existed more than 3,000 years ago. True. Now they are fighting a battle to keep their community alive. The Samaritans.net is also one website that I hope is still online. That is probably one of the oldest ones about the community, but it's not opening. We're already at page 8. We're still mostly seeing Good Samaritan community services, so not related to the community really. Mount Gerizim and the Samaritans. The Samaritans of Mount Gerizim represent the smallest, most ancient living ethnic community in the world, bound together by a profound and rigid religious belief. Central to it is the sanctity. Basically, I think this means like the holiness, but sanctity, the state of or quality of being holy, sacred, or saintly. Sanctity. Okay. Statement of authenticity or integrity. Here it says, the fact that Mount Gerizim is a sacred mountain, still after thousands of years respected by the Samaritans for religious purposes, provides an assurance that in terms of the beliefs underpinning this community, both its authenticity and its integrity are virtually unimpaired. The archaeological site is also protected by law. Well, yeah, we do believe that the heritage and the traditions that have not changed for hundreds, even 3,000 years. Aaron, a good friend of mine here, also has tours about the Samaritans. Let's see what he has to say here. Many people have heard the word Samaritan, immediately think of someone who stops to help a stranger in need. True. It also it all started when the king of Assyria exiled the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel. He replaced them with a people called Kutim. These people ultimately converted to the religion, to the Torah religion, and over the centuries began to see themselves as descendants of the 10 tribes. When the Jews returned from 70 years of Babylonian exile, these Kutim, now called Shomronim or Samaritans, since they lived in the Shomron or Samaria, asked to build the second temple together with the Jews. Zerubbabel refused this request, and from that time on, the Samaritans and the Jews became the bitterest of enemies for a period of almost 1,000 years. So this is basically the most known explanation in the Jewish world for where the Samaritan community is believed to have come from. For 2,000 years, they refused to leave as they were persecuted by the Romans, Christians, and Muslims. The Samaritan community dwindled to just 146 individuals by the time of World War II and almost were extinct. So they're basically 10 big tribes. Alright, that will be it for this episode. I hope you found something interesting. We obviously, as you can see, we couldn't find that many search results connected to the Samaritan community. We still found some pretty interesting things, but I think we can try other search engines. Maybe we can find other interesting articles or sources or anything like that. If you do have any recommendations, I had a recommendation of searching a search engine called Yandex. Never heard about that one, but I'll give it a try next time. If you have any questions or any ideas for any other episodes in the future, please do. Finally, I would very much appreciate it if you leave a like for this episode, comment, share it definitely if you found it valuable, and last but not least, if you haven't subscribed yet, feel free to do so. We are just starting this one. Hope to see you the next time. And also, if you do want to watch my first episode, press here. Yeah. See you next time.